Found them. Let's go. Hey guys, so it's day 21 in quarantine and I'm running out of clothes to cut, sew, bleach, tie-dye, you name it. So today I went into my dad's closet and took a pair of his old jeans. Sorry Dad, but today we'll be turning this into a bucket hat. In order to make this, you're going to need a pair of jeans, a bucket hat for reference, or you could use an online pattern, scissors, a pen, and either a stiff ruler with string or one of those bendy rulers. I don't have a bendy ruler, so I'll be using good old-fashioned string. So the first thing you want to do is make your pattern. I started by measuring the top of the brim by tracing the shape with my string, making a mark on the string, and then using my ruler to measure the length. This measured to be a little less than 12 inches. Next, I measured the bottom of the brim using the same technique. I figured out later that this step was unnecessary because we find the exact measurement when we make our pattern pieces using the other side of the brim, but now you know. Then I measured the top of the body and used that measurement to determine the size of the circle for the hat's top. My circle measured out to be 23.5 inches around. After you got all your measurements, you want to cut out your pattern pieces. I made my pattern pieces out of a brown paper bag that I cut flat. First, I made the pattern for the hat's body. I measured it to be 11.5 by 3 inches. Once you cut out your rectangle, fold it into 8 pieces. Use a pen to draw a line down each fold. Next, cut along the folds and leave a little piece uncut. This is called the slash and spread technique in pattern making. Once all the slashes are cut, use tape to secure your pattern piece to a flat edge. You want to spread out each eighth by 1/16 of an inch. I know it sounds ridiculously small, but it's all you need. I then measured the length of the curve. The top curve is 11.5 and the bottom was 12, which matched the measurements I took on my hat. I roughly cut out this piece and placed it aside. You'll want to use the same slash and spread technique for the brim. Start by cutting a 12 by 2 inch rectangle. Fold it 8 times and slash each fold. For the brim, you want to spread out each eighth by 1/3 of an inch. This will allow for the brim to be a little floppy. If you want a more tight or loose brim, you can spread out each section more or less depending on what type of hat you're looking for. Lastly, you want to cut the circle for the top of the hat. Do this by folding a square into quarters. For my circle, I want the radius to be 3 5/8 of an inch. I measured this out and drew little hash marks as guides to draw the semicircle. I then added 1/4 of an inch for the seam allowance. I measured out the seam allowance all around the semicircle, marked it, and then cut the circle. You now have all pieces for your hat. I then did a precise cut on my pattern pieces for their body and brim. I'm not sure why I didn't do this earlier, but whatever. Before cutting out my fabric, I added a 1/2 inch of seam allowance to the brim and body pattern pieces. I think it would have been more efficient to add the seam allowance before I cut out the pieces, but now you know from my mistakes. I originally duplicated the pattern pieces and cut out 2 of each, but that wasn't really necessary since jeans are double layered. So I would recommend cutting out 1 piece for each of the hat's parts, meaning 1 circle, 1 body, and 1 brim. Cutting out your pattern pieces might be the longest part of this whole process because you want to make sure it's so precise. But having a good pattern is key to having a good hat. To cut my fabric, all I did was secure my pattern pieces using pins and cut along the edge. Then do the same for the circle, although you only need to cut 1. You'll then have 2 brims, 2 bodies, and 1 circle. Start by placing the brim and body pieces right side to right side and pin in place. Sew a 1 inch seam allowance along the 2 shorter sides, connecting the 2 pieces. Now you are tasked with the impossible. Attach a circle to a rectangle. I'll be honest, this took me 3 tries and my hat still didn't turn out that well. But the best technique I discovered is marking each corner of the circle. This way you can attach it to the same places along the body of the hat. So for example, 1 hash mark on the circle will match up with each of the seams of the body. You want to try your best not to allow any bumps, as this will make your hat look lumpy. After you pin it all in place, sew a straight stitch connecting the two pieces. You now want to add the decorative stitching to the brim of the hat by sewing 4 to 5 stitches along the edge. It's recommended to use an edge stitch, but I don't know what that is, so I just used a thick, wide stitch function on my sewing machine and it turned out fine. You just want the stitching to be noticeable. So at this point you should have like the body and the top of the hat sewn together, and then your brim that has the stitch, like decorative stitches across it, if that's what it's called. So let's just try this on. Oh god. I feel like a little pirate or something. Okay, not bad, maybe. And then let's put this brim, just see what it looks like. Okay. It's not too bad actually. I think I might trim the body a little bit, maybe like 1.5 inches. And then the last step is just sewing the brim to the body of the hat, and we'll see how that goes. So here I am trying to fix my mistake. My body was way too thick. We're talking about like 3 or 4 C's here, but I just chopped it right off. Next, pin the brim of the hat to the body. This part might as well be as hard as attaching the top to the body, but at least you now have some practice. I then sewed it all around and, well, this was the outcome. I ended up adding jean label to the front of the hat, partly to cover up my messy stitching, but also because I thought it was cute and added something else to the hat. That's all for today. I hope this video inspires you to do some thrift flipping during quarantine. See you all next time.